What is up, YouTube? It's the Atheist Guard here. I'm Gregory Dirth, and in this talk I'm going to be going over indoctrination. And the reason I'm going over this is not so much for theists who might watch my channel, but actually there are atheists out there that always grew up as an atheist. Like, they had atheist parents, they never were exposed to religion, and they never had a problem with empiricism or having rational beliefs because they were never given irrational beliefs. And as such, they don't have that point of contrast. They don't understand what it's like to be a theist with indoctrinated beliefs. So, to start, we should probably define what I'm talking about here. Indoctrination is basically a process, kind of like brainwashing, only a little less severe. Arguably, actually it's quite similar, but it's a different thing. Indoctrination starts from pretty much the time you're able to reason. And in some cases before that, they start giving you imagery, start giving you ideas that you can't even process because you haven't reached that age of reason. But you're just given these ideas as truisms. You know, they're relaying these things as truth before you can even process them critically, before you can actually appreciate what they're talking about at an intellectual level. And the ideas come from the religion that they were indoctrinated into. And this is a practice that they were, convinced was completely proper and moral to do. It's completely proper and moral to indoctrinate your children into the belief system that you have. That's how they see it. That's how my parents saw it. They want to teach you what to think instead of teaching you how to think. They want you to believe something instead of understand something. Because they want you to believe first, so that when you get to the age of reason and later, into your teen years and your early adulthood, you don't have the mechanisms to even challenge your beliefs properly. You don't have that basis of rational skepticism and understanding of the scientific method or any of that to challenge your beliefs. Rather, in a lot of these religions, like the one I was in, challenging your beliefs is considered a bad thing. They teach you that it's a bad thing to doubt, that it's a bad thing to even think that you might have a wrong belief if your authority figure, be it your parents, your preacher, or otherwise, told you that it was true. So you don't even bother trying to question it for a long period of time. And some people never escape their indoctrinated beliefs because they don't doubt. They're not allowed to doubt. They don't allow themselves to critically examine all of their beliefs equally. You set up this sort of protective shield around your religious beliefs, your God beliefs, and all that stuff. That stuff is outside of skepticism. You can't apply skepticism to it. You might be an utterly brilliant person in the rest of your life, not making irrational choices or doing anything, intellectually dishonest or wrong. But when it comes to those specific beliefs, they're in a box that's excluded from that process, from even consideration. And I've met many brilliant people who happen to be indoctrinated fundamentalist Christians. It's like they have two brains. They have this brain where they can actually process the world around them. I've met scientists who are that way, professors, utterly intelligent people, but that other brain that they're not allowed to use those tools in is the one that contains all the religious dogma, all the religious ideas, their belief in a God. It's all protected in that little box over there to the side. That's what it's like to be indoctrinated. And that's why I feel like it's almost merciful for me to try to talk people out of it, to try to convince them to go ahead and allow themselves to critically examine their beliefs. That it's not a bad thing to doubt, that it's not a bad thing to question the veracity of claims made that you were just told to accept from birth, pretty much, or at least from the age of reason when you started considering these things and asking why. Because I told you so is typically the answer given. Because God told you so, because it says so in his book. How do we know that's his book? Because it says so in the book that it's his book. There's no actual conversation about this, and you're told to not question. And a lot of people will relate to that. They'll tell stories about, how they were going to church, and as they started asking questions, they were asked to leave because they were asking questions. You're not allowed to do that. That should tell you something about it right there, that there's something fishy going on if you're not even allowed to question the beliefs. But people don't get it. And I understand. I mean, if I had not been raised or indoctrinated in that way, I wouldn't get it either. I'd be like, why are these people so stupid? How can they not understand this? How can they be so intellectually dishonest that they can't just look at everything with equal footing and say, does this make sense? Does this make sense? Instead, they have this willful ignorance when it comes to these particular subjects over here. That's the way I would see it if I had not been indoctrinated. But having been in that position, having had those beliefs and been in that mental trap and escaped, I feel particularly motivated to help these people. Now, I don't know how much of a help I can be. I have lots of conversations, lots of dialogues in electronic format, trying to help people out. And it's a very uphill battle to get someone to even start to consider what you're giving them as evidence or whatever. And it usually starts with incredulity arguments where they're basically saying, well, science can't explain this, science can't explain that, evolution doesn't explain this, evolution doesn't explain that. They start doing that whole thing, and then you got to kind of like get them up to speed with some basic biology knowledge so they feel comfortable enough to take the next step and, critically examine everything and not have a bias. But it's a tricky thing. And the only reason I do it is because I know how dark it feels to be in an indoctrinated belief system, how trapped you feel, and how utterly freeing the liberty that you feel once you let go of all that and you embrace rational discourse and you accept that rational skepticism is healthy, that it's necessary, and that you shouldn't have any protected beliefs, that everything should be questionable, that you should be able to have your mind changed, and most of all, you should be able to say, I don't know, without having to insert some explanation into every gaping hole of your knowledge. That's a very freeing thing, to learn to accept the I don't know answer. And that's what I want people to find. I want them to get out from underneath the dictatorship, their imaginary dictator. That whole thing is just like inane and insane to me now. And looking back at it, I could totally see I was trapped. I was completely trapped in my own brain, in my own mind. And it's an utter joy and pleasure to live life for life, to live this life to the utmost, because you're only guaranteed this life, because you have no reason to believe in an afterlife, all that. I mean, it's so much more meaningful to exist once you get out of that belief system. But for people that, never were in a belief system like that, my fellow atheists that grew up atheists, they don't get it. They're just like, yeah, life's important. This is our only life we have, and I'm going to make the most of it. What's the big deal? They don't understand the contrast of what it's like to be like, well, I'm living for my afterlife. I'm just trying to get to the next thing. Jesus is coming back soon, so this life doesn't really matter that much. I'm just going to wait it out until the end times is done with, because we're in the end times now, evidently, or something. The complete mirror image, the contrast, is what a lot of my atheist friends lack. They just don't get it. That's cool. I mean, it's really hard to explain, and it's really hard for them to picture what it's like to be trapped in your own mind like that. To them, it just looks like people are stupid. Foolish? Maybe, but I don't think stupid's the right word for it. But brainwashed and indoctrinated, those are explanations that makes these people as much victims as they are villains. And we should feel sorry for them to some degree. And I understand a lot of atheists don't. They just get utterly fed up and have hair-thin triggers when it comes to conversations with theists or creationists and things like that. I feel bad for them. I'm sorry, because I've been there. All right, well, thanks a lot, you two. I'll catch you later.